Have you ever wondered what would happen if a human being actually saw God? Not imagined, not believed, not heard about, but saw him, because one man did, and instead of feeling chosen, he felt destroyed. In a time when a nation looked strong, stable, and blessed. God said it was already collapsing from the inside. The people were praying, but not listening. Worshiping, but not surrendering. Living like everything was fine, while drifting further away from him. Until one moment changed everything. A vision so overwhelming, it didn't comfort a man. It broke him. And what happened next was not a message of peace. It was a calling most people would run from, because God wasn't looking for someone perfect. He was looking for someone willing to speak the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. This is the story of Isaiah, the prophet who saw God, was shattered by his holiness, and was sent to a people who refused to listen. And by the end of this story, you'll understand something most people never do. Seeing God doesn't make you comfortable. It changes you completely. Judah was living one of its most stable seasons. Under the long reign of King Uzziah, the nation had grown strong. Its armies were organized, its cities fortified, and its influence extended beyond its borders. The land produced, the markets flowed, and the people walked with a sense of security that had not been felt in generations. From the outside, everything looked right. Jerusalem stood tall, its walls firm, its temple active. Offerings were still being made. Priests still carried out their duties. The rhythm of religion had not stopped, but something deeper had already begun to rot. The people had learned how to honor God with their lips while distancing their hearts. Justice was being neglected. The weak were overlooked. Corruption quietly made its way into leadership, into homes, into everyday life. It wasn't a sudden collapse. It was slow, silent, almost invisible, and that made it even more dangerous, because when a nation stops noticing how far it has drifted, it begins to believe that everything is still fine. But heaven was watching. God was not silent. While kings ruled on earth, something far greater was about to be revealed above it. In the middle of this tension, a man was being positioned, not in a palace, not in a place of power, but in a place where he would see what no one else was seeing. His name was Isaiah, and his life was about to be interrupted by something that would mark him forever. A moment that would expose not only who God is, but who man truly is in his presence. And nothing would ever be the same again. Transition to next topic. But this calling would not come through comfort. It would come through a vision so overwhelming that it would break him. Before it built him. It did not begin with a voice. It began with a vision. In a moment that Isaiah would never be able to erase from his memory. The invisible world became visible. The reality of heaven broke into his perception with a force that no human mind could fully contain. He saw the Lord, not as an idea, not as something distant, but enthroned, high and lifted up, seated in absolute authority. There was no doubt, no confusion. This was not symbolic. This was real. The train of his robe filled the temple, extending beyond what the eyes could measure, as if his presence overflowed every boundary dot around him. There were beings unlike anything on earth, seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet. And with 2 they flew. They were not casual. They were not distracted. They were consumed. And they cried out, one to another, with a sound that carried weight, reverence, and fear. Holy, holy, holy is the Yesbo, Lord of hosts. The repetition was not poetic, it was emphasis. There was no imperfection in him, no shadow, no corruption, no comparison. The entire place trembled at the sound of their voices. Foundations shook. Smoke filled the space. And in that moment, Isaiah did not feel special. He felt exposed. Everything inside him became clear at once. Not just his actions, but his nature. Woe is me. The words did not come from obligation. They came from realization. I am undone. He wasn't afraid of punishment. He was overwhelmed by holiness. For the first time, he saw himself not in comparison to others, but in comparison to God. And that changes everything. He recognized his condition, a man of unclean lips, living among a people of unclean lips. And now, standing before a holy God. No excuses. No defense. Just truth. And the truth was heavy, because when a human being truly encounters God, the illusion of self-righteousness does not survive. Transition to next topic, but what happens next is unexpected, because instead of destroying him, God begins to restore him. Isaiah was right about himself. He was unclean. He was not exaggerating, nor being dramatic. For the first time, he was seeing himself with absolute clarity. Before the holiness of God, there was no room for masks, justifications, or comparisons. But what came next was not immediate judgment. It was grace. Among the seraphim. One moved. Not with haste, but with purpose. He took a live coal from the altar, a fire that was not common, not earthly. It was fire from the place of sacrifice, from the place where something died so that something else could remain. The seraph approached Isaiah, and in that moment, everything could have seemed threatening. Fire, divine proximity, total exposure, but that fire did not come to destroy, it came to purify. Coal touched his lips. The very place he had confessed as unclean. It was not random. God touches exactly where a person recognizes their need. And then came the declaration that changed everything. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is atoned for. There was no negotiation. There was no human effort. There was divine intervention. In an instant, the man who felt lost was restored. But notice something profound. God did not ignore sin. He dealt with it, and in dealing with it, he transformed it. Isaiah did not leave that moment the same man who entered it. The one who arrived broken was now ready, not perfect, but purified. Asterisk. And there is a huge difference between the two. Asterisk, because God does not call the perfect. Asterisk, he purifies those he chooses to use. And then the silence changed. The scene changed. The atmosphere changed. Asterisk, now it was no longer about Isaiah's sin. It was about God's purpose. Transition to next topic asterisk, because after purification comes the calling. And the calling is not always comfortable. Asterisk, the atmosphere still carried weight. But now it was no longer the weight of guilt. It was the weight of a mission. Asterisk, Isaiah hears something that was not exactly a direct command. It was a question. Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? God did not need to ask. He already knew. But questions reveal the heart of the one who answers. And in that moment, Isaiah could have remained silent. Asterisk, he could have thought about what he had just experienced. He could have tried to understand everything before responding. He could even have stepped back, but he did not do that, because those who understand grace respond differently. Asterisk, here am I, send me. Asterisk, no. Guarantee, no details, no knowledge of what would come. He simply made himself available. And this is one of the most powerful moments in the entire narrative. Asterisk, because Isaiah was not chosen for ability. He was chosen for willingness. But then comes the part almost no one expects. God responds, and the answer is not encouraging in human terms. Asterisk, go and tell this people. So far, everything seems fine. But then comes the real weight of the mission. Asterisk, they would hear, but not understand. Asterisk, they would see, but not perceive. Asterisk, their hearts were hardened. Asterisk, this completely changes the perspective. Asterisk, Isaiah was not being sent to a ready people. Asterisk, he was being sent to a resistant people. Asterisk, and this raises a silent question. Asterisk, would you continue, even knowing you would not be heard? Isaiah does not step back, but he asks, asterisk, how long? And the answer is heavy. Until the land is devastated, until the cities are empty, until only a remnant remains. Asterisk, this was not a mission of applause. It was a mission of faithfulness. And this is where many would give up, but not Isaiah, because those who have truly seen God do not negotiate obedience. Transition to next topic, and as Isaiah began his mission, the political scene around Judah was becoming increasingly unstable. Asterisk, while Isaiah walked in obedience, the world around him was not standing still. Asterisk, in fact, it was becoming more dangerous. Asterisk, the political landscape began to move quickly. The kingdom of Judah, apparently stable for so long, now found itself surrounded by real threats. Asterisk, to the north, the kingdom of Israel had formed an alliance with Syria, a strategic alliance, a war alliance. Asterisk, and the target was Judah. Fear began to spread like dry fire. Inside the palace, King Ahaz was not like Uzziah. He did not carry the same strength, nor the same confidence. His heart was not established in God. Asterisk, and when leaders are not firm, the people feel it. The Bible describes this moment in a nearly tangible way. The heart of the king and the people shook, like trees swayed by the wind. This was not just politics. It was. Panic got asterisk, and it is exactly in this scenario that God sends Isaiah. Again, asterisk, not to confront this time, but to deliver a message, a chance. Asterisk, Isaiah approaches King Ahaz with something that, humanly speaking, seemed impossible to believe. Asterisk, take care. Be calm. Do not fear. Asterisk, do not fear. Asterisk, in front of two kingdoms united against you. Asterisk, in the face of a real threat of destruction. This was not a common message. It was an invitation to trust. Asterisk, God was clearly saying, what looks inevitable will not happen. Asterisk, but there was an invisible condition in all of this, trust. And then God does something even more surprising. He offers a sign. Ask the Lord your God for a sign, any sign, as high as the she, heavens, as deep as the depths. But Ahaz refuses, not out of faith, but out of unbelief disguised as religion. Asterisk, I will not ask. He did not want to depend on God. He had already chosen to trust human alliances. Asterisk, and when someone decides to trust the system more than God, even a divine opportunity is rejected. Asterisk, but God does not depend on human decisions to fulfill his plans, so he declares the sign himself. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. A message that would cross generations. A sign that went far beyond that political moment. Asterisk, sign pointing to something eternal. Asterisk, but in that instant, few understood its weight. Asterisk, because while God spoke of future redemption, the people were still trapped in present fear. Asterisk, and fear, when it dominates, blinds. Transition to next topic. But what happens when a leader chooses not to trust God? The consequences begin to appear, and they are not light. Ahaz made his decision. Asterisk, and decisions, especially those involving trust, never come without consequences. Asterisk, instead of trusting God, he sought help where it seemed more logical, safer, more strategic. Asterisk, he sent messengers to the powerful empire of Assyria. Asterisk, a kingdom known not only for its strength, but for its brutality. It was not a reliable ally. It was a dominator. But fear does this. It distorts perception. It makes danger look like a solution. And Ahaz did exactly that. Asterisk, he handed over resources from the temple, riches that belonged to God, all in exchange for human protection. Asterisk, and for a moment, it seemed to work. Assyria came. It defeated Judah's enemies. The immediate threat was contained, but the price had not yet been fully revealed. Asterisk, because when you invite something powerful to protect you, you also open the door to being controlled by it. Asterisk, And that is exactly what happened. Asterisk. Judah was not freed. It was slowly oppressed. Assyria's influence began to enter not only politics, but culture, worship, and the identity of the people. Foreign altars began to appear. Pagan practices began to be copied. Asterisk, the people of God were beginning to look like everything except the people of God. And all of this started with a decision, a choice not to trust. Asterisk, meanwhile, Isaiah kept speaking, warning, calling, alerting. But now, his message became heavier, because it was no longer just about avoiding error. It was about dealing with its consequences. Asterisk, and there is something silent, but powerful in all of this. God had warned. God had offered a way, but man chose another. And now, the chosen path was beginning to demand its price. Transition to next topic, but even in the midst of consequences, God had not yet finished his story with that people. Asterisk, even with everything happening, one thing remained untouched, the promise, because God does not react to chaos. Asterisk, he already has a plan before chaos begins. Asterisk, while kingdoms rose and fell, while wrong decisions produced consequences, while the people drifted away, God continued pointing to something greater. Asterisk, something that did not depend on human faithfulness, the Messiah. Isaiah begins to declare words that cross time. Asterisk, words that, in that moment, seemed distant, but carried an eternal weight. Asterisk, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. A son, not just for one time, but for all time. And then the titles begin to reveal who he would be. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, asterisk, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This was not just poetry. It was identity. It was revelation. Asterisk, it was God showing that, despite everything, he was still in control of history. But perhaps the most striking part comes next. Isaiah describes this Messiah not only as king, but as servant, someone who would be rejected, despised, wounded. By his wounds, we are healed. Asterisk, and here the narrative reaches an even deeper level. Asterisk, because God was not only solving political problems. Asterisk, he was solving humanity's greatest problem, sin. And all of this began back there. Asterisk, with a man who said, "Here am I." A man who saw God, was broken, was purified, and chose to obey, even without guarantees of the outcome. Asterisk, and the question that remains is not only about Isaiah, it is about whoever is hearing this story now. Because the voice that asked, "Who will go for me?" still echoes. Asterisk, and the answer still needs to be given.